Hello and welcome to another episode of the SEO Unplugged podcast. I'm your host, Itamar Blauer. Today, I'm joined with Gent, who is an SEO consultant. He's got a newsletter called the SEO Sprint and another newsletter recently that came out called Indexing Insight that's on Substack. Adam, great to see you. How are you?
I'm good, mate. Thank you, Itamar. Thank you for having me. I've listened to a few of your the podcast and a few of your episodes, and I really enjoy it. So glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, that's very nice to hear right off the bat. Thank you. So today we're going to get into something that you've been looking into a lot lately within SEO, which is indexing. And obviously, the title of this, Google Indexing Secrets. Now, of course, that's entirely your jurisdiction in terms of what you would like to talk about from what you've seen. But I just want to get to the beginning actually of what sort of got you really interested within Google indexing specifically. Like, how did that come about? Because you're looking into this a lot right now.
Yeah. So to start off with, about a year ago, I noticed that for the SEO Sprint actually, a page that was got a lot of traffic, or I thought got a lot of traffic, it just suddenly dropped out of the index one day. Like I had a little like mini script. It kind of checked the status of the page for like clicks and impressions, and it just dropped to nothing. And I checked with your inspection tool, and it was suddenly not indexed. And I was really confused, considering that page literally had just been. I literally published. It was something around internal linking case studies, um, and I was like, oh, I've just released this, and why is it now dropping out? And it just got me curious about it. There was no warning from Google. There was no discussion. There was no like email. There was no alert system. It was just not there anymore, right? I know we all have our own ways of monitoring, like traffic pages. Pages like returning no index, or showing 404 or something. There isn't really anything to tell me that a page just wasn't indexed anymore, right? There's not really anything out there. And I was like, oh, this is annoying. So being me, being in like an ex-product manager, I work with a lot with devs. I'm quite good with systems and like thinking of how to build things with devs. I know a technical kind of person, and I wanted the opportunities to work with him. So I was like, I'll hire you to build like a prototype. So literally at Christmas time, I kind of put together my ideas, like a PRD, product requirement document, like a 2 or 3 page document, just to explain to him what I wanted, the outcome of what I wanted. Nothing fancy, literally just a very basic app that monitored the SEO Sprint and another kind of like pragmatic SEO website that I built really badly. Because I had some ideas on how to actually monitor at scale, and we tested it, and it worked. And it worked really well. And we did it, something I haven't really talked about in the newsletter or anywhere, but we're managing to do it two or three times faster than anybody else. So we can literally like inspect pages on a daily basis at scale faster than anybody I've seen, because of how I understand the API and how I understand websites work, basically. And yeah, and then from then we've just been part-time in between doing jobs and consultancy, and my wife had a baby 3 months ago, so I'm trying to get grips with a newborn baby. Yeah, just been building this kind of solution as best we can, like hired a designer to properly like make it look nice, working with alpha testers to actually really stress test it and really understand from a user point of view what people want out of it. Keeping it simple, but I don't know if you know, but building any of the simplest software is complex. So yeah, I'm like almost a year later. I'm now at a point where I'm like, yeah, cool, it's almost ready to release. But from monitoring stuff on a daily basis, I was like, oh, there's all these things that I thought that happened with indexing that but if you don't monitor it, it doesn't really come up. And that's where the newsletter came in, because I wrote the SEO Sprint because of the experience I had at Deep Crawl of working with developers and trying to help others other SEOs, other SEO professionals working with devs who wanted some, any kind of help figuring out how to work with devs. Because back then, when I first started working with devs, there wasn't anything. Buy them beer was the extent of the helpful information. So that's what the SEO Sprint was about. And the indexing insight is similar sort of thought. I just want to help people understand indexing because I thought I knew it. I've been doing this since 2011, and I thought I was like, oh, I know indexing and crawling. Yeah, I understand it. And actually, when I really looked at the data, I was like, oh, there's things happening and we can dig into this and talk about it, but there's things happening that you don't see in the report, in the page indexing report. I'm still not quite sure why, but yeah, there's things that happen that make you think something's happening, but actually that's not what's happening. And it's all to do with how they report the data and talk about the data in the tool and the definitions that I think a lot of us repeat. But actually digging into data and really understanding it breaking my mental model of indexing. And that's what the newsletter is about. It's about the little things I found and helping me. Because when I write things down, I'm better at thinking it through and checking myself as well. Because sometimes we all go a little off and try and talk about things too quickly before we actually figure it out. So yeah, it's also about helping me figure it out along the way in making sure I get my thoughts in a way that's clear to people, because that's how I go through my thought process. So yeah, so now we're here. I'm talking to you because you're like, oh, that's interesting. Because we've been talking about it a little bit. Saw me on LinkedIn, tweets and not tweet, post some stuff on LinkedIn. I keep saying Twitter. Post some stuff on LinkedIn. Now I'm here really talking to you. So yeah, I'm just playing around and finding out basically.
Sure.
Here I am.
Yeah, and so something I want to probe you on a little bit is when you said, like, I thought I understood indexing. I thought I
Yeah.
understood Google indexing. So what is it that you found that really sort of changed your perception or your understanding, or what was the sort of like breakthrough moment from stuff you've looked at recently that you think many people or most other SEOs don't really understand about indexing?
For a start, crawling and indexing are different processes. They're separate. It happens a lot of times. A lot of people are like, oh, it crawls a page and updates the index. That's not what happens a lot of the time. I'm seeing, even with log file data I have on my own kind of test sites, it's clear that, and again, I need to write this up, but it's clear that indexing has its own set of processes where your page will drop out of the index, and that's something I also broke my mental model. It'll drop out of the index once it's recrawled it. No, the indexing is happening separately. You're being judged as soon as you go into the index. You are being judged by Google systems, and it's going, do I want this page? Do I want to waste my time and energy and resource and pay for this page to be in our database effectively? It doesn't need to be recrawled or crawled to be updated, to be judged. If it's really, really useful and it's updated a lot and it comes from a high authority website and has lots of backlinks, it'll get recrawled a lot, yes. But a lot of the time, for majority of websites that are kind of meh, like crawling and indexing are happening. It's happening, but it's kind of separate. And on the indexing side seems to be like reversing itself sometimes. So something I'm writing up right now, which will make sense when I publish it. But basically, you know how you have like URL unknown to Google, discovered currently not indexed, crawl currently not indexed, submitted and indexed, or indexed but not submitted. That's like usually the flow of most pages, right? You discovered, you crawled, you Google indexes you, okay? It reverses. So actually I can prove and have data to show that lots of websites go backwards. So your page was submitted and indexed, then it moves to crawl currently not indexed. Then sometimes it can either jump to URL unknown to Google or discovered crawl currently not indexed. Now, I'm pretty sure that happens because the coverage states, which is what Google describes it in the documentation. You know, like the reasons why your page isn't indexed or the reason why it's indexed. It's usually crawl indexed, URLs unknown to to Google. That kind of maps to their processes internally, their indexing pipeline, their crawling pipeline, and represents where your page is within their index architecture. So, for example, URL is unknown to Google doesn't actually mean that Google's never seen it. It can actually just mean that it's now not even part of the crawl queue. They don't care about it that much, that it's now in a place where in this system it's like, now we don't care about this enough. And that's, again, a separate process to crawling. Yeah. The other thing that brought my mental model is just crawl currently not indexed. If you Google that term, I've written actually a newsletter about this, so it's on the new Indexing Insight newsletter. If you Google that term, lots of people talk about how Google is basically crawled your page, but they don't care enough. Something has caused them to go, now we're not going to index this page. That's actually not true. From what I've seen, Google is indexing the pages, but actually it's being, like a lot of the time, it's being reversed. So it's indexed it, and there is something going on, usually clicks and links, right? That's making it go, we don't think this page is useful anymore. And over time, we're just going to drop this page from our index. And it's going to go back into crawled, currently not indexed. And the terminology in Google's documentation it's not wrong. It's just, I think, a little bit misleading. And you can go to the pages in the Google Search Console report, and if I went and did a URL inspection kind of check on a page, sometimes you're like, oh, Google has never seen this page, but I know this page has impressions and clicks like 12 months ago. That happens because for whatever reason, Google's like, no, we don't think this page is useful anymore, so we're just going to drop it. And it's gone and reversed. The state has reversed to now URL is unknown to Google. And I always thought that if a page got indexed, like Google would tell you if they'd seen it or not. But it seems to not be true. Google's like, no, we've never seen it. There's no data here. But in the API, it's like, has crawl data. The tool I built, we basically can flag when a page is being previously indexed. We can flag if it's been previously changed its canonical URL. So there's basically, it's breaking my mental model of, they seem to report that there is like pages that were crawl previously indexed, but actually a lot of that is previously indexed. And that's actually a category that we had to create. I didn't think that was a big deal, but actually for one of the alpha testers, like 13% of their million page monitoring of their pages is previously indexed. Basically content that's being actively removed by Google from its index, which blew my mind. If I'm honest, I didn't think that would happen, but yeah, it's happening. And I'm just writing about it, really.
Sure. And so this is something that's quite interesting because I guess there is a level of complacency that is maybe a default state for many people, which is like, when I publish a piece of content, I want to make sure it gets indexed. So once that page gets indexed, you sort of move on and you're like, okay, the job has been completed here. This page or URL is indexed, and now we can just leave it behind. Maybe update the content. But from what you're saying, it's sort of like a lot of pages are experiencing the sort of adverse effects of, maybe it's because because you mentioned like clicks and links, but what would be the sort of things that you see in terms of why this sort of reverse process is happening, especially if we're maybe talking about maybe if it's a difference between smaller and larger websites, if there's any patterns you see, but sort of like what can explain that, do you think?
So it's a complex answer, because SEO isn't like, you can't be like, it's because of clicks, right? I could be like, oh, because everyone's like the DOJ documentation. Even I'm like, oh, like Google uses like clicks to like evaluate pages, and the quality of the click, and they look at user interaction, there is a big like counter argument to that, right? For example, why would your About Us terms and conditions or even your /blog page get indexed? They don't get clicks or impressions, but they get indexed. Do you know what I mean? So you're like, why don't pages get indexed? And I'm like, well, it's probably tied to their, and this is another mental break for me personally. Indexing must be closely related, or not closely related, sorry. Whatever they, like an index is just a database of information stored, right? So they must store evaluation calculations for each document, each page. So they must be using whatever they calculate, like the quality of the page, clicks, interactions, over time. There must be some kind of threshold, even for like, maybe even for different kinds of like terms or topics, where they're like, actually, like, we don't, because they've said themselves, we don't fully understand the content of pages. So yeah, from what I've seen, it just seems to be your classic terrible written content. Like, obviously, like, not great content that's been published, meh content, not a lot of effort. Oh, we're going to hit publish, and we're going to like kick out tons of pages. I actually built a pragmatic SEO website to test out like the actual tool, and I put zero effort into it, and I fully expected it to not get indexed. I even used the URL, like, the auto indexing tools that you shouldn't use, just to get it indexed. And I was fascinated because Google quickly caught on and kicked it out, and I was like, good. You're not completely, like, there's obviously signals, right? But it was a terribly built website, not a lot of effort into it. And it's just, I think everyone's like, oh, why are pages being kicked out? Even you're like, and I still, and it's just the classic thin pages, low quality content. And if you look into your search analytics, you'll probably see like query count, impressions, clicks, both for those pages and for those site sections and for the domain to be quite low. Add into that low quality backlinks. You know what I mean? Over time, Google has billions and billions of data points over long, like years and years and years, to know what's, well, not good and bad, but they know what people, especially SEOs, especially most people who try and invest in SEO, do, and they can probably figure out quite quickly, especially with like pragmatic SEO websites. It's not like, oh, all of a sudden this website that has zero domain authority, zero backlinks, has 100,000 pages. Oh, probably shouldn't. We'll catch on quite quick to de-indexing that content. So yeah, it's hard to be like, it's this specific thing, because I generally do think it's probably tied to like ranking well in Google. Probably equals that you're probably going to rank well, have pages indexed in Google, right? Because although you can't be indexed with, if you're indexed, you're being served. That's kind of what being indexed means. You're in the serving index. You're in the part of the index which allows them to serve those documents to users, versus you're not in the serving index. You're in our database, but then and again, not to jump around topics, but they slowly but surely remove and delete data from the index, because if you've ever worked with large databases, it costs a lot of money to house a lot of data. So they don't want to keep all the information about a document, about a page. So they'll get rid of the like canonical URLs. I can see it happening for pages. 1 minute you have the canonical URL and the crawl current index state. The next month it's URLs unknown to Google and you have no data.
So then this is the question then for the more, established businesses and, a lot of, clients that I've worked with. These are established firms who want to be there for the long term, but obviously over time they may scale up their content creation, whether they're, B2B professional services or an e-com site, right? So then what would you say to these types of websites or these businesses if they, as a way for them to at least keep on top of, or in terms of their most important types of pages. So if you're e-com, it's going to be, your product pages, your PLPs. What would you recommend to them, just to provide at least some kind of reassurance, or things that they can do actively or proactively, as opposed to just be, I guess, complacent and over time get removed from the index? What should these types of businesses do?
So from my own experience, do content audits. Like you just pull in like click, impression, queries over the last 12 months, organic search data, time on page. Like, do a content inventory audit and look at every URL that is both like historic in your like archive.org, in your sitemaps, in your search analytics data, in your Google GA4 data. I always put for my clients, I always do a content inventory audit. Ever since, like, this is all the way back to like 2016. I've always done it because this is not new information. Like, Google has said, I think it was like decades ago, they said like low quality parts of your website can impact on your overall like ranking, and they said that. I was like, I can still remember that from like 2017, 2016 when I was still in agency side. To do a content inventory audit of your website and just look at what pages are not doing well, like on average compared to like the rest of your website. So what I do is always look at, relative to the rest of your website, what's the average of your like all of your clicks, impressions, what's lower than that, right? And then what's declining as well. Because it's not always to do with the quality of your content or your SEO. Sometimes the market can just be, not doing well. It's going downhill. I have a client right now who's in SaaS where one term, they're in the kind of a weird midpoint where one term is declining because it's being used less, and another term is being used more. So there's weird, like, we need to still invest in the content that people used to use, but we need to invest in the content the same time that people are going to be using, right? So it's this weird like midpoint. So always be aware of the market as well, but just do a content inventory audit of your website. How many websites don't do that basic thing every 6 months, just to understand the quality, not only of your pages, but how well they're doing. And just doing some basics around updating all pieces of content, looking at actually, have you created content that's just for SEO and not really used at all for like any other parts of the business? And just making sure that you're looking at your inventory of pages, because that's what seems to be, from my experience and what I'm seeing in the data, that's what seems to be the big problem, is just Google's index is reacting, I imagine, to the quality of effort in terms of input into the pages, because it's probably just looking at the signals around and the quality, not just the quality of the content, but the signals around that over time. Nobody's clicking on it. It's not getting impressions. It's not going anywhere. Why am I indexing it? Why is it in my database? It doesn't get any. Okay, it's got a few internal links, but the domain itself has no real authority, no real backlinks, no real brand. Is the domain itself on a decline in terms of traffic? Because we know Google over time looks at those things in terms of clicks inform the future from the past. So the SEO Sprint's a good example actually of this. So the SEO Sprint, I haven't really spent a lot of time on that for anyone listening recently, because I've been on this new project and had a baby. But interestingly, only recently have pages started to be kicked out of the index. And that's fascinating to me, because these pages were never designed for search, but they're just indexable. And suddenly, for no reason, they're getting kicked out. Now, I actually look at it with this kind of analytical eye, and it's like, well, the website's on a decline in terms of impressions and clicks, because there's nobody, I'm not, banging the drum, so to speak, in terms of marketing. You can see the increase over time and then this year has seen like a steady decline as pages just people lose interest or aren't as engaged. I'm not, talking about it as much. The backlinks I got from like 2 years ago, I imagine again, because PageRank has a decaying factor. Same thing, right? It's just decay of marketing brand and just clicks. And Google's index is reacting to that, going, well, some of these pages I think are just starting to get kicked out because the signals around it, the domain itself and the content, it's just, why would they index some of these pages at the bottom end of like no real clicks, no real impressions, not designed for search. I'm not sure why they're indexed, but yeah. So to answer your question, do a content inventory audit, look at the performance of your website, and then look at improving content and doing the normal, like look at the intent of the SERP, and make sure the content you're investing is actually got effort into it, and don't try and publish too many pages at once, because that's all just adding up to probably crawl currently not indexed, basically as well. So
sure, and
it's the usual stuff. Like there's no silver bullet. It's the usual stuff. It's just that the index reacts to it, basically.
Well, but this is the thing then. So the follow-up for that is, assuming you've made these sorts of changes or you're sort of noticing these patterns, what would be the best way, from your opinion, to get that? Because obviously now I guess we're talking about crawling, which is sort of different because Google will need to still crawl that URL to understand the changes that have been made within a page. And because you're mentioning they're two different types of workflows or systems or processes, what would be the best sort of way, if you're a brand and you're like, okay, I've done this content inventory audit, I've gone and updated these pages, what should the sort of default be? Because obviously sometimes it's about scale. So it's like, are we going to go into GSC and manually request indexing again of every single page that we updated? Is there any, what are sort of suggestions that you would advise?
What's get recrawled? You would probably need to make sure that your internal linking structure's good, because one thing I keep seeing is people keep forgetting to link internally to like historic blog posts that they've updated, right? Yeah, we've updated this content. I'm like, okay, but have you gone back and looked at like your most clicked pages? Your pages get a lot of links themselves. Your homepage, have you internally linked to that, right? That's step one. Not just like fetch it in Google Search Console, because that does alert them and makes it a little bit more of a priority. But probably the number one thing would be internal linking. The second thing is probably make sure that's in a sitemap, because again, we download sitemaps in the tool and we check them daily for new pages. That's part of the tool, because I want to make sure it was automated, not just do it once and then have to resubmit it again. That would not be useful. But we notice sometimes people remove pages or add. We had one alpha tester where there's like I'm not kidding, like 200,000 pages were added across 1,000 sitemaps in like 7 days. It's just, and they weren't all canonicalized. They weren't a canonical URL. So just make sure that your sitemaps are updated, or like make sure that the pages are included. It sounds basic. It happens a lot. And then just the usual stuff of working with social teams, PR teams, making sure that it is distributed. Because if you're writing the content or building the content out, there should be some distribution. Now, SEO is not in a silo anymore. You cannot just hit publish or update in your CMS and be like, right, Google, come and crawl it now, please. Google has to have a reason why, right? That's what the index is reacting to. So yeah, just working with other teams to make sure that it's distributed on either social media platforms or talked about, and people are republishing it. There's other things you could probably do that are more technical, but like for example, like there's other tips and tricks like updating your sitemap and changing the order of the URLs every day, but they're things that you can do them, but yeah, they're little tricks and things. But if you're just a business, wanting to get recrawled, the best thing is it's about clicks. It's about building brand and authority and all those words that are a lot of work, but that's what Google's looking for. So, because I built the test sites to try and game it, but, it's starting to get smarter than a lot of people are trying to outwit it. So yeah, I would just say if you're a normal business, you've got a lot of crawl coming out indexed, it's probably an indication that Google doesn't like your content or you're not getting enough clicks or links to your website, and that's where you should focus on the actual marketing of your website, basically.
Sure. And for the last, just to wrap up this conversation, which has been incredibly interesting, really. So going back to the indexing side, and obviously we sort of talked about the reverse process and sort of how to react or be more proactive in terms of the sort of decay that we've been talking about. But you'll still get a lot of people who are like, I've created content, whether that's an existing business or a new website. They're like, how do I actually get indexed? Do you have anything from stuff that you've seen or tested in terms of making sure that new URLs are getting indexed? Obviously, that's a very generic question, and we haven't delved into like the relative relevance or quality of these content pieces. But is there anything that you could shed there?
Yeah. So this is something that I have personally witnessed and experienced over the years, right? The quality of the directory, the section of the site that you're publishing in, for example, the blog, will impact on your ability to get crawled and indexed quicker. Okay? I'm going to need to write more on this, but I'm pretty sure that if you have a terrible blog with like content that is, thin, low quality, like really doesn't get any clicks or impressions, and you publish content in that section, Google has already historically looked at that section and gone, "I'm all right," because I've seen in that tool sites that like sections of sites get kicked out to get like together. So I'm pretty sure there's something going on with page clustering. So before you even hit publish on that new piece of content, you've probably already been judged, right? So something you can do is do that content inventory audit and just start to I hate the word get rid of, but just really look at the content quality of those site sections and either update them if there's literally, if you can't update them, if there's really there's no value in this piece of content being on this website apart from SEO, which isn't always the case, then you can remove it or redirect it, just to help improve the quality of that site section. I need to write more on this. I need to delve more on this, but I think there is some kind of, like, not average, but something is being calculated for site sections for page clusters, because a blog section, even if it's not from a URL structure, it might be from internal linking, because blogs link to blogs, landing pages link to landing pages. That's how most websites are built, from what I've seen. So yeah, my advice is, when you're publishing new pieces of content, not only the basic stuff like sitemaps, internal linking, etc., think about the page clustering. Think about the site section you're publishing in. Is it really been crawled quickly, and indexed quickly, or is it taking a long time for, say, the blog pieces to get crawled and indexed, yet your product pages, for like a landing page section, seem to get crawled and indexed quicker, right? It could be an indication that the blog section isn't as, even on the same domain, isn't as good as it should be. That's something I've seen personally. So that's why I do a content inventory audit, because I'm trying to get rid of the pieces that are dragging down the rest of the site, shall we say, and either actioning them and improving them first, or helping the team archive them, get rid of them. And I've seen that improve the crawling indexing rate, how fast it gets picked up by Google, just by doing that, just by improving those site sections when I hit publish on new pieces of content, or creating new topic clusters. So you have a new site sections, new folder structures. Some people don't like doing that anymore because everyone's done it to death, but it depends on how you do it. From my experience, anyway.
Mhm. Well, definitely a lot to think about, and I think that pretty much. Well, obviously, there's so much more to talk about,
So,
but
I mean, I'm going to write a newsletter on it. So yeah, there's a lot to chew on and think about and debate around. I'm sure people will disagree with me, but that's fine.
so
Um,
this was going to be my last question then. Where can people find you if they do want to sort of dive deeper into the sort of things that you're testing at the moment and that you're writing about?
yeah, so I'm on indexinginsight.substack.com. That's probably going to move, hopefully, if the tool does well. That's where you can find all these ideas around indexing, and then all the insights I'm gaining, all the things I'm talking about right now. I need to write them all up into, like I said, proper arguments. I'm better when I'm writing, everyone, than I am speaking, if I'm being honest. But you can just subscribe to that newsletter and get it straight to your inbox, all these things I'm doing. And there's a tool coming out, and you can see that in the welcome email. I just explain a little bit about it, but it's all about monitoring websites with 100K to a million pages of important pages. Yeah, and yeah, more details to follow. But yeah, I'm working with somebody to build that so that people like yourself, Itamar, can get the data and prove me wrong on what you think is going on with indexing, because it's really about the data. That's all it's about, really. It's about capturing the data and then analyzing it.
Absolutely. No, that's brilliant, mate. And obviously the stuff you're doing is great. More help, more data, more things for the
Yeah,
community to leverage and use. So on behalf of everyone, we appreciate you for that, and the people who you're working on this with. So but yeah, that pretty much wraps it up for today. So I hope you enjoyed this episode wherever you're listening from. And as always, we will see you in the next episode. Hey, you've reached the end of this video, but don't worry, there's plenty more great content that you can watch right now. All you have to do is click one of the 2 video links on the left side of the screen. And also, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell to never miss out on future uploads.